Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Neutrally Biased podcast. And today we are going to discuss a concept that I've devised myself, and it is the ocean of thoughts. I know it sounds cliche and a bit more of a poetic rhyme or a poetic metaphor, which one may use in a poem, but this is a very deep concept that I've observed within our thoughts itself. That what are the levels of our thoughts and on what basis do we classify these levels? So let's get started immediately. Almost all the humans on the planet that have existed, exist, and will exist express only 5 to 10% of themselves. Unknowingly and sometimes knowingly, we all tend to wear a facade. Most of us have two sides to our character, and this may even relate to the Jungian psychodynamic theories that there is a persona or a mask we wear in front of others, and beneath that mask lies a character which is only revealed to us ourselves in candidness, in its innate form, that is the shadow. And the reasons for wearing this mask may be different for different people, but the ultimate aim is the same: to be able to interact in a social setting. And that is it, because if we really tend to express our innate characters fully, we also tend to violate these social settings and become deviants, set off from social conformity, bound to bear the consequences too. And all of these terms may sound a bit weird at first, but if we actually observe these two sides of ourselves, we find that most of the time they are in complete conflict for most of us. And this conflict of both these characters arises from the contradiction in their thoughts. For example, Tom is a software developer. He gets scolded by the boss very harshly for a simple syntax error in his code, which spoiled the website sample sent to their client. Now, Tom, on the outside, accepts his mistakes with guilt and probably shame, while literally pleading for forgiveness and a second chance. However, in the inside, his shadow character may be furious as hell. His other side may think that such behavior from the boss is intolerable and revenge must be the answer to his mistreatment. And believe it or not, the above, the above example is much less of an analogy, but more of an archetype of most of the average people in the world. Yeah, so surprisingly, it is a harsh yet a bold truth to accept that what we think in our shadows most of the time are thoughts that may not be socially acceptable when translated into actions. Thus, the only difference that remains between us, the average people, and a morally unacceptable person is whether we go on acting on our thoughts or not. So, if Tom had actually pursued his thought of taking revenge on his boss, then he surely would have been classified as a psychopathic murderer. However, this is not at all to say that our shadow only thinks of these deviant evil paths. It can also go from highly exaggerated sexual fantasies to sanctified philosophy. Anything we do not compliment on our mask and keep it to ourselves. So, the amount of thoughts and the type of thoughts we leave unexpressed is what actually defines our character and even our persona. I know all of this sounds a bit confusing at first, but this is exactly what we will dive into today: the ocean of thoughts, which classifies the whole of human perception into different levels. And I'm sure you might have heard about level of thoughts earlier as well, existing as a concept. That is where the first level is cognition, the second level is metacognition, and the third level is meta awareness. If you do not know about them, you can search it up, or I'm informing about them right now. Cognition is the immediate thoughts that come to our mind, like about a person, about an object, about an event, about a date, about anything. the usual general thoughts we have about literally anything in the world. Now, metacognition are thoughts about thoughts, or thinking about your own judgments, decisions, and imaginations. So basically, you zoom out into the eagle's eye view and judge your own decisions and judgments taken earlier based on your present wisdom. For example, if I reflect on my past decision of quitting a job, I may think that was not a wise decision. And here, this transition happens to meta awareness, where we utilize this judgment to a conscious purpose. Now, when I know that what decision I made about quitting my job was not a wise decision, I can translate it into preventing any future decisions to be of such type, or to be made out of ignorance or lack of awareness about the situation I'm in. And the level of thoughts I have observed and figured out are, in fact, quite similar to these levels, but they contain an even broader criteria for classification. That is, questions. So, why questions, you may ask? But before we move on, if I go on to ask you, who are you, what would you say? If you are like any other sane person, you would say your name. I am this. But think about it. Are you really your name? If I say I'm Jim Gorgon, well, Jim and Gorgon are just two words made up of 9 letters in total. If I say I'm this physical structure I see in the mirror every morning, but I'm not my body, it is just a well organized flesh arranged on a skeleton. I do not refer to it as am hand, am eyes, am brain, or am body called sick this morning. I say it is my body, my hand, my brain. If I say I'm a male, that's just another way of identifying my biological features. If I say I'm my age is just a number. And the same thing applies to you as well. You are not your name, you are not your body, you are not your age, you are not your gender. If someone makes a clone of you and gives it your name, would it be you? No, right? That would be a duplicate of you, but not you. So we may even go further asking, what are you? And if you are not what you supposed you were, are you even anything? Get the answer to these mind boggling questions by buying our ebook Psychology of You for just $1 through the link in the caption. So now, let's get started. Because ever since the dawn of Homo sapiens, we are the only species that is exceptionally good at cooperating and interacting in very large numbers. And thanks to this innate quality, we not only came to dominate the food chain, but now we can also create, distort, or mutate these chains. And the reason behind this cooperation lies in our ability to form and tell stories. Almost everything, our thoughts, our beliefs, our inventions, our systems, our religions, are nothing but stories. Even the concept of gods itself is a story we created and tell ourselves to justify the meaning of our existence. And paradoxically and funnily, we are the gods of our own gods and creators of our own creators. Now, reflecting back to the topic, stories that we share among ourselves are fictions meant to serve ourselves. And when many people are convinced in a single fiction, it becomes the reality. For example, here in India, we use the rupee currency. And wherever you go in the whole nation, the value of, say, 100 rupees remains the same. This is not because 100 rupees is an objective value that is stored into the atomic spaces of the 100 rupee note, but because the value of 100 rupees is a story all Indians are convinced in. In other words, the value only exists in our imagination. If we take this $100, 100 rupee note, excuse me, to the US, it would just be an invaluable piece of paper. The catch about such imaginations or intersubjective realities, one may say, is everyone believes in it, hence it is true, hence it is real. The storytelling is like a superpower of humans that enables us to warp reality into serving our own purposes. But the only reason this ability of storytelling exists is because we also have the capacity to ask questions. It was the question, who created the universe, which enabled us to create stories about God as seen in holy books of religions. It was the question of how can we reduce the liability of a shipwreck in the 18th century Netherlands, which led to the formation of the stock market story. It was the question of Newton, why did the apple fall, which allowed him to discover, not invent here, the story around gravity. It was the question in the minds of German who was responsible for World War One that Hitler answered with a twisted story about the inferior and betraying Jews, ultimately bringing about the Holocaust. And this is the capacity to ask questions is not just reserved for the greats and elites, but is present in everybody. If it is a question, why am I still not completed with my tasks even after a week, you could answer it with a story which can either be of an excuse or of responsibility. If it is the question, why did I overlook the red flags in her, I can come up with a story of either I was dumb or she was pretentious, or the cliche, we were never meant to be together. However, how we classify the level of thoughts is based on the level of questions we ask and the stories we come up to fulfill them. So let us take a deep dive into these four levels of the thought oceans finally. And before listing out each level, the reason why these levels cumulatively are called the ocean of thoughts is because they resemble the same depth and sequence as the levels of ocean: the sunlight zone, the twilight zone, and the no light zone. The fourth level, however, in this paradigm, rather than a layer, exists like a whirlpool in the ocean, and you will soon know why about that. But first is a zone of acceptance. The thoughts in the level of acceptance are more than stories to questions, but impulses that arise in the back of our minds from time to time. These impulses are reacted upon immediately through action or imagination without second guessing it. For example, it could be kissing a loved one, or losing yourself in a fantasized orgy, or getting so angry you feel like slapping your boss, or leaving your house, agreeing to someone without knowing what they actually meant, or imagining a savage come back to the bully who teased you. In other words, these thoughts are highly subjective, accompanied by very intense emotions. And though they make us feel very deep love, affection, anger, or pleasure sometimes, these have no real meaning and pave the path towards unconscious actions because there are no questions that are asked. If we actually observe, impulsive thoughts dominate 90% of the thinking capacity for almost 95% of the people. When we are a bunch of 2 year olds, the world is a playground for us and our imaginary stories. However, when we are put into the education system, instead of getting encouraged to question the world and discover its answers in our own ways as we grow, we are given a specific set of their questions and their vague answers, where the real aim is not even to educate about the world, but to teach enough for the exams. And the same thing is followed when we select our subjects and universities. Most people, instead of actually questioning what they want, accept what society, peers, or parents want from them. and select their studies and professions accordingly. But just blaming the society for this thoughtful, pun intended here, for this thoughtfulness is stupid. The zone of acceptance is also a very comfortable zone. See, it is very easy to deal with the trivialities of life and set trivial goals, like crashing on somebody, attending multiple parties a week, getting hooked up with some attractive hoe, winning Fortnite, or testing our luck on online gambling. This level of thought, though it is surely shallow, but it stretches wider, way beyond any other level, just because there are too many meaningless subjective interpretations we can make of this objective reality. So, in a way, 90% of the population is on autopilot, not questioning, not discovering, not making their own stories, but following a conventional narrative laid down by the society for most of their life. So, it may come as a surprise to you, but standing out from the rest of the population on the planet is now very simple. Just think differently and deeply. The second level is a zone of observation. And here, thoughts deal with the discovery of the objective reality. The questions that are asked at this level are like, what is the significance of X? How does X function in a given context? What are the properties of X? And these thoughts are much deeper and are construed from the same everyday phenomenons we all witness. For example, a psychologist observes the functions and aspects of the human psyche and comes up with theories to explain it. That is how we have Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Alfred Adler, who came up with multiple psychodynamic theories. Similarly, Einstein became the Einstein we know today because he formed the famous theory of relativity out of a simple train lightning strike analogy. In fact, at this level, we are also able to objectify and quantify the subjective experience. Let's take happiness. Happiness is a subjective experience. However, a neurologist turns it into an objective fact when he explains it as the end result of the release of neurochemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. A psychologist observes happiness as a state of emotional well being that may arise by experiencing pleasure, satisfaction, or contentment in a given moment or overall life. An economist measures happiness on multiple factors such as income, environment, accessibility to resources, etc. A philosopher terms happiness as a moral goal meant to be experienced and shared by all. Thus, all psychologists, sociologists, physicists, mathematicians, philosophers, ideologists, debaters, theorists, or scientists in general exist on this plane of thought, observing and questioning the intricacies of the world. Now, coming to the third level, which is the zone of imagination. And here, imagination does not refer to the mindless fantasies one may delve into at the acceptance level. Rather, here, imagination is a build up over the observation level where the several theories, discoveries, or the hypotheses created are utilized for a purpose to produce an intersubjective result out of the objective means. And it deals with the question what can and what should be done with this X discovery. Here, the power of imagination plays a huge role since one piece of information can be utilized in many ways. Thus, the task here is not only to underline the various ways, but also to highlight the best one of them, so as to actually make the discoveries meaningful. For example, when physicists uncovered the laws of physics, other physicists utilized their findings for new inventions. Otherwise, knowledge without action is mostly useless. Charges of an atom were discovered by Benjamin Franklin. Later, Edison used this information to invent the light bulb. Einstein gave the nuclear theory. Oppenheimer used it to invent the atomic bomb. Observing the stagnation of the economy during the medieval times led to the formation of the system of credit, where people for the first time put belief in the future. Though the means taken to achieve our aims are based on objective facts, the aim itself is an intersubjective belief that is shared by many people, such as how the economy grows is based on objective processes. The aim of growth itself is a concept drafted by ourselves existing only in our own imagination. So, people who reach this level are mostly idealists, such as business people, athletes, practitioners, experimenters, astronomers, political leaders, or in short, directed action takers. However, one thing to note here is that people at the third level can access the two preceding levels at any time. Like a cricketer who observes his form again and again as to improve. Similarly, people at the second level can also access the first level at any time. Like they could go on thinking about eating an ice cream or chatting with a friend or whatnot. But here, before we come to the fourth level, there is a line that we encounter at the end of the third level, which is present at the bottommost point at the ocean of thought. And this line is what I call is the utopian line. See, for many of us, when we reach the third level, we direct our actions and imagination to a purpose. And we chase these goals hoping it will bring about a utopia or a dream come true moment for us, if not the world. Except, this line is impossible to reach simply because it isn't there. It is just a mere illusion. So, even if we are able to reach our purpose in our lifetime, the fulfillment does not last long and the utopian paradise fades away in a few moments. For example, a swimmer who purposed himself to win the Olympics turns out to actually rank first on the podium. He does not remain in a state of eternal bliss and enjoyment celebrating forever. He comes back again to define a new purpose. So, in a way, it is like a wormhole at the bottom of the ocean, which throws us again at the purpose, at the surface. From there, we need to escape the grip of impulsive thoughts, observe where we stand now, and then proceed to the third level with another purpose in mind again. Hence, the nature of these three levels of thoughts is cyclical, but the fourth level is an exception. So, what is it then? Well, the fourth level is nihilism. Nihilism is the level that can exist anywhere throughout the ocean because nihilism questions everything, the existence of everything. It asks a simple and an easy question that is the most difficult to answer: why everything is the way it is? Why the heck are we even here? Why do we even matter? It reaches the uncomfortable truth that the fact everything is meaningless. Hence, the nihilistic level is more of a whirlpool. If it catches you anywhere in between, you are taken into the realm of non significance, where you literally view the thought ocean from a third POV, realizing it is all meaningless. Religions and philosophy have surely tried to make up an answer to this question by designing the concept of God, virtues, and morals. But in the modern day, when scientific evidence confirms the real scale and objectivity in our universe, the stories by religions and philosophy stand false and only act as a source of hope rather than an authority to pertain to. Hence, it is easy to enter the realm of nihilism, but very hard to stay there because we do not have a story to the question it poses today. We do not have a story for the reason behind our existence and the existence of the universe. So, what do we do when we see everything is meaningless? We become blind to the truth and continue to create our own meanings through our many stories that exist only in our own imagination. This nihilism is like a glitch in our thoughts that confronts us to the absolute truth we are afraid to see.